to another episode of Sell Me This Pro with myself, Sam, and BDog. And we got to warn you to start, we're both working at the moment. We've got a lot of stuff on the go. It is 10 on a Saturday morning, and we are here recording this. Neither of us are fully awake, so bear with us. And BDog is also struggling. You got like a wisdom tooth or something coming out, friend? What is happening there?
I hope it is a wisdom tooth and it's not something worse, but it is. It feels like someone has repeatedly punched me in the face about 8 times. You can kind of see, just here, it's swollen a little bit compared to this side. So don't judge me, guys, and just deal with it, please, because we're trying our best out here.
We're trying to, the energy is going to be super low. I am currently in Copenhagen for Blast 4 groups. By the time you watch this, I will be on a plane heading to Cologne. BDog, you've been like mad busy as well. Every time I speak to you, you're on another broadcast. What have you been up to?
Yeah, so obviously I work quite close with the CCT guys, so I'm sort of always working with them. But me and Lucy have been working on skyesports recently. We did the IESF closed qualifiers as well for the women's scene. There was also an event last weekend for the Trade It FE Masters number 4 that we were involved in. So it's been a busy few weeks, but it's been good because there's been a lot of CS and there's been a lot of interesting storylines coming out of the competitions, especially in the women's scene, with ESL Impact starting up again in a few weeks. And I've had some rumors about some roster changes, and all I can say is it's really interesting and you should definitely keep your eye out.
There we go. So we got lots to talk about over the next few episodes. We choose a pro each week. So tell me, this is someone you've actually now had a chance to cast on LAN. Who is our pro for this week that we're going to be diving into?
Yeah, so it's this guy called AW, and he plays for DMS. And DMS are this team that have sort of exploded since the start of 2024 online. Like, they've been playing a lot of competitions. To be honest, they're a team that has got some upset potential, but overall have been winning the games you kind of expect them to win, and then have lost the games you kind of expect them to lose to. So it's one of those teams that is just trying to prove themselves. But what's impressive about the team is kind of the continuous improvement they've had just from the amount of officials. And AW is one of these players that is always consistent in this team. You've also got to mention Height as well. Height's come out of the Cloud9 Academy a few years ago, and he's been super consistent and has been playing with AW, has been playing with the core of this team for about a year, maybe a year and a half now, and these guys are finally starting to sort of prove their worth in the online space, which has been really lovely to see, especially because all of them are like 17, 18 years old. And it's just worth mentioning and probably talking about these guys because they've just attended skyesports World Championship. So this is their first LAN as a team, and it didn't go amazingly for them, but there's a lot of sort of key takeaways you can look at and think, okay, well, there is definitely potential here.
Before we get into talking specifically about our pro, the CIS region at the moment is just banging out player after player after player. You're seeing it in Tier 1 and in Tier 2. They're just there's so many of these teams with these 16, 17, 18-year-old kids just kind of dominating the online era. It blows my mind how much talent is coming out of that region. But I'm also concerned because there tends to be that language barrier for most of these youngsters. They don't necessarily speak English. And I'm worried that there's not enough Tier 1 Russian-speaking teams for them to move into. So it becomes a little bit of a bloodbath, right? Fighting for those big positions. Or have I got it completely wrong?
No, I think you're right to a certain extent. But what I will say is, I don't think there's enough information out on certain pros and what languages they can speak. For example, I just don't think like we'd know whether they could or not, because unless they're actively communicating just sort of like for CIS, it's like more Telegram than X, but unless they need to speak English, why would they? So it's one of those in which I think like I've been like pleasantly surprised, like Donk's English, for example, and I think in the CIS region their English develops like astronomical rate. Like they're really good at just kind of picking it up. Like Donk's English, like now compared to a year ago, it is probably like amazing compared to what it was, and I think they're more than happy to learn English as well. It's just kind of maybe when they advertise themselves moving forward, not just their ability, but they can say, hey guys, like I can actually probably play in an international team. That's something I kind of would like to try out.
How do you go about, I mean, specifically for you when you're prepping for these games, how do you go about finding out about these tier two players? Because obviously most of the interesting information is sitting on Telegram, like you said, in Russian. I mean, do you have any secrets? Is there any way for like a hardcore fan to find out what's going on within the region if they're interested in those talents?
Um, not outside of the game, really. I don't do that much prep into kind of what their lifestyle is. I just basically watch the demos. I kind of, because I work quite a lot in the CCT circuit, I do watch them quite regularly because I mean this season for CCT is like 20 European series and they're all just going back to back to back, and it is just consistent Counter-Strike all the time. And where they've got sort of like 3 of the series running at the same time, that means that, for example, DMS is involved in like all of them. So suddenly I can watch them probably like daily. So that means there's a lot of reps, there's a lot of demos you can sort of pick up as well. So I pretty much just either watch them live when I'm casting, or I go back and I watch the demos and try and figure out sort of what makes them really good. And for DMS in particular, they've got very good structure. It's just the mid-round decision making is sometimes a little bit hazy, where they're a little bit indecisive or they're not really too sure what to do.
I like BDog is like, what the hell, Sam? I'm not playing on Telegram trying to get all the gossip. That's the desk host's
No.
job. So, yeah, DMS, obviously, this is like you mentioned, this is a team. They have just been grinding online, giving me very like 2023 Monty. Every single time they have a chance to play, they are playing, right? I mean, they've just been making sure that they can get as many reps in as possible. I think you mentioned to me when we were doing the prep, 82 maps since January. Is that right?
That sounds right. I'm just trying to actually look now and find them. 78. So basically that. Yeah. So a lot of CS like that. That's in the past 3 months as well. That's not in like the whole year. The whole year is
Yeah, because I was like, when
probably,
I was saying it and I said Jan, I was like, that's not enough. But last 3 months, that suddenly becomes pretty insane.
yeah. So just scrolling here, trying to find them. Where have they gone? I just had them. I don't know where they've gone. Anyway, it'll be a lot of games. It'll be a lot of maps.
Do you think that that's a good thing for a new team, or do you think it can be problematic as well?
I think it's actually interesting because I was having this conversation the other day with just one of my friends, like IRL, that's got nothing to do with CS, and they were saying, "Why do these teams play so much?" And I said, "Oh, because it's official experience." And they were like, "Yeah, but what if they keep doing the same things wrong?" And I think that's a really interesting sort of thing to take away. And I actually would liken DMS's the amount that they play to Mouse NXT, because Mouse NXT are consistently in like the top 3 maps played just in general in HLTV over the last sort of like year and a half. And it's ridiculous to me how well they are performing in every event. When I'm thinking, these guys must live, breathe, and sleep Counter-Strike. Like, I don't know how they're having a healthy 8 hours of sleep. And then warming up, they're probably reviewing the demos after the games as well. You're then playing the officials. You've then got prep for the officials beforehand. I don't know how they do it, because they must be running like 12, 13-hour days every single day. And this is why we have to have player breaks, because these guys would otherwise just work themselves into the ground continuously, right? So I hope player breaks done them well. I hope they've had a chance to be able to rest, touch grass, not actually touch CS for a little bit. Like, it's scary, the sort of the work drive of these guys. But I guess, again, it kind of goes to say, do they think it's a job when they're just playing CS? So maybe they're just enjoying what they do. In a roundabout way, I've answered your question, but I think officials, it's really good to have experience, especially kind of in these tier 2, tier 3 tournaments, because it will prep you to, and this is kind of like a shortcut to being better in the tier 2, tier 3 scene, because the amount you're playing, you'll understand what the teams are like as well, the way that they play. You don't often see tier 2, tier 3 teams changing up their playstyle all that much, which might make them easier to anti-strat. It might make you a little bit more unpredictable as well. But at the same time, there needs to be a balance with offline and to kind of afford to do all of that in the first instance. I feel like there's a lot of teams that are working way too hard, which is amazing, But I worry about the burnout for these guys that are like 16, 17. You still got like 10 years ahead of you in competitive gaming.
I hear you on that, especially the young age. I feel like when you are younger, though, when you are 16, 17, then spending all day playing CS doesn't feel, like you said, it doesn't really feel like a job, right? You haven't quite reached that point where you've got, I don't want to say you don't have adult responsibilities, but you haven't quite decided to go that route yet. So you're just jamming. But one of the things that your real life friend mentioned, and that's something I wanted to bring up in terms of results, like it's all well and good to play all of these officials, but if you're not giving yourself time for adequate, correct practice and preparation, you're going to end up, one, forming bad habits or potentially making the same mistakes over and over again. When I look at DMS's results over the last few months, I mean, you mentioned it there, but there's nothing, I'm not looking at those results going, wow, these guys are impressive. I'm kind of going, oh, look, they lost here, and yay, they won here, and they lost here, but they're not doing anything that's potentially making us go flip. These guys are on a trajectory to just get better.
Yeah, it looks like from the results they've gone, oh shit, another tournament. Okay, yeah, we'll play it. Rather than let's take some time to ourselves and sort of rest and recuperate. Because you're right. I mean, you take a look at HLTV, I'm looking at it now. Their best win rate is 60%, which is pretty decent on Mirage, but then they've got like 3 or 4 maps in their pool that are like 1/3 of the time they win them, 2/3 of the time they don't. And the thing is, you could kind of explain this by saying they are starting to play better competition, and they are, because they are making it further, sort of in these CCTs and making it to the playoff stages, for example. In some instances, they're also sort of going over to like res and playing there. So the quality of opponent will only improve for this team, but also the width of like the pool in tier 2 and tier 3 as well is massive. So suddenly you're trying to prepare for like 30, 40 different teams in like 3 months. Like that's a lot. That is a lot to try and handle. And especially when you're not kind of at the top of your game and you're not really feeling comfortable. And I think DMS, where they are so young as well, what I definitely noticed at LAN, at Sky Esports, is that they are definitely momentum based. It's one of those where if they don't start the game well, they're going to struggle. But if they can kind of build themselves into it, if they can kind of feel that they've got a chance in the game, they'll sort of run away with quite a few rounds. So I think, again, it's one of these teams that is very volatile due to being so new, due to feeling like they need to play in every single competition and trying to prove themselves and try and get better, because it's almost like you're kind of chasing the highs of, like, for example, DMS beat Monte. And I know this was at a period where Monte were kind of going through their rebuild, they were kind of imploding. But it's like, wow, we beat Monte. Like, we're feeling really good now. We can just keep going. And then you're almost like chasing the fact that you can do it again and again and again. And then suddenly you're not. And you start to feel a little bit worse. And then you're burning out. And then player breaks coming around the corner. And you need player break. So I think a combination of all those things potentially is what happened. I don't really know. I'm speculating, but that's kind of what I would assume.
We get to speculate on the show. That's what the best part is. So we're now going to dive into where we're here to talk about a specific player. It is AW, but it's an interesting one that you've gone and chosen a European rifler, because something that we have also spoken about off air, which we can bring up now, is that in tier 2, tier 3, and anything below that, as Thorin likes to call it, tier 100, it is kind of difficult sometimes to spot the standout riflers. We tend to talk a lot more about the AWPers. They tend to be the players that people notice. Riflers, and I think you said it very best, they kind of, if they do the job, they do their job, that's enough. We don't look at them and go, oh, this is a fantastic player. We go, well, good job, you did your job.
Yeah, I actually gave an example of this on broadcast yesterday, and I'll give it here as well, because we were watching a team called Permitter, who are these Polish guys that have sort of, I don't know, in tier 2, tier 3, all the Polish teams just kind of swap out the Polish talent. Everyone, it feels like it's played with everyone. It's like a big family over there. But there's this guy called BDogCS, and he's really good, and his stats are always so consistent. But he never has. He might have like this occasional round where it's absolutely crazy, but that'll be like one every like 10 games maybe. But you always look at his stats, and bar a few exceptions, like for example when Permitter are getting destroyed by a team, he's always normally like at the top. And it's like, where has this come from? Like, what are you doing? Like, I've not really even spectated you in the game when I'm casting, and you're suddenly on 20 kills. It's like a silent assassin. But I like to call these guys like behind the scenes workers, where they kind of try and make a lot of room for their team. They're trying to come and support their team, and it's not boring to watch when you're just analyzing them, but maybe to a fan where you've got this gunfight going on over here, and then potentially you've got BNox going for this lurk and creating space. Like, you'd rather watch the gunfight going on on broadcast, so you don't really get to see him. So he's kind of behind the scenes doing all the work. But I think he's a very good player, for example, and I feel like that kind of explains what you're saying about if it's not like a donk where Donk, when he was playing on Spirit Academy in CCT, the observer was just basically watching him because he'd be flashed out first and he would just run. He would just hold W. He's like in tier 1, he's way better now. But honest to God, on Spirit Academy, this guy would just appear and he would just get 3 kills. It was ridiculous. But that's the excitement of like an explosive rifle. You don't get those like every day. That's not a thing, really. So it's hard to kind of distinguish who's good, who's not. So for AW, I kind of picked him because he's always been sort of at the top with Height, who's their AWPer for DMS, and they set up Height quite a lot. But AW is always the guy that kind of goes in second. He's never really going for like these entry kills. He's always sort of behind the pack, so he can just sort of clean up. But he's very good at doing that job. So I was like, it's worth talking about.
So you mentioned that he's very good at doing his job. I mean, do you think that he's able to transition into different positions if need be, or is that really his focus as the cleanup man?
I think he could be a pretty decent entry. I'm not sure at the moment with this DMS team if they've got the sort of support network to kind of enable him to do that. And I think he knows that, which is why he's saying to his team. And I feel like his team will also just go, I'll go first. Like a guy like Kalash, who really struggled at Sky Esports Championships. He was going, I'll go first, you just trade me. And I feel like that happened a lot at that event. And that's why you kind of, if you watch any of the VODs or you watch his demos from Sky Esports, you'll see that he's normally, on Inferno in particular, like the second guy that will go in towards B and just sort of guarantee the trades now they've got the information. But I feel like he could definitely progress into an entry. Like, he's very aggressive when he wants to be. But again, it stems into this, I think, overall problem for DMS and what happens a lot in tier 2, tier 3, where they lack confidence, or they show a little bit too much respect to the other teams. We'll get into that in a moment with Sky Esports, but they lack confidence in their ability and what they believe in to be correct. And then from there, you can see the natural positions of they're going to play a little bit more passively. AW is, I think, going to wait till that second guy goes in. So I feel like that's one criticism I would have of the guy, because I really do think he could be just opening up, and then you don't have to play in these deficits. You don't have to make it harder for yourself, because he has got the aim just to go in and just shoot them all and create a lot of space for DMS. And he has done that a lot when I've watched him. So I don't understand why he's not sort of going in first all the time.
I have to say that this hotel chair, I don't know if you saw that the whole time I was like moving around. I cannot find I just want to do that. Like, it's just not a comfortable space.
You have to spin it around and just kind of sit in it the other way.
I mean, if I could, I feel like, what if I put my no, that's worse.
Is it one of those like disc chairs?
Weird desk, like proper uncomfortable. And my posture is such that I just want to do that anyway.
It's like, I mean, this is not a plastic beanbag.
That's pretty much, and at least beanbags, you can move. Anyway, I mean, that's not important. If you're wondering why I keep moving around like a crazy person, it's because I'd much rather just be slumped in a chair somewhere. Let's get into the conversation we wanted to have about, and this is always exciting for me with these tier 2, tier 3 players, is when we get the first opportunity to see them on LAN, because I think that changes so much, and there's definitely a perspective change. We have to be very careful here. So I respect the fact that you are working on this broadcast, so I cannot throw you under the bus or ask you the difficult questions, and I will not put you in that position, because I don't pay you to be on this show and you were paid to commentate. I will say, based on what we saw online, Sky Esports looked a little bit chaotic, and I'm being very polite here, chaotic and difficult for teams and players. Obviously, Betboom actually pulled out and left this is now your first LAN as a team. You're going to India. It's obviously not the most ideal conditions from what we've seen. That's got to be really tough on a young group of players like this, because there is a mental thing that comes into play now. So is it fair for us to take a look at DMS and how they played at Sky Esports and kind of judge our decision on whether or not AW is worth some investment based on this performance alone? Or do you think that they still held their own at Sky Esports and we could possibly look at it?
They didn't hold their own at Sky Esports, like at all. But with that being said, you're right. I feel like you have to take this LAN especially with a pinch of salt, because day one, well, I mean, they on the A stream they played one best of one. On our B stream that we were on, we watched 7 rounds of CS and then had to sort of postpone it to the next day. And what I will say for Sky Esports is, whilst day one they were receiving probably quite just criticism, they did improve it, and the players have come out and they've like even shown like the PCs have all improved. And for them, for Sky Sports, it's their first LAN as well. Things should have been in place, but they did improve as time went on. For DMS, I also don't know. Again, speculation here. I don't know what sort of like the structure is behind the scenes for this organization. So I don't know, for example, if they have a team manager. I don't know if they've got someone that goes with them to events, because they've never been to an event. So another thing to maybe consider is that these guys wouldn't have had sort of the same background staff as some of the other organizations. It might have just been those 5 players and their coach, and that is it. And then it almost feels like you don't know when you're playing, you don't know what to expect, and it can be a little bit of a confusing, muddled time. I think a lot of the results, not just DMS's, in Sky Esports can be taken with a pinch of salt. I think with that being said, when I was watching DMS, and I want to preface this by, they got destroyed by both Eternal Fire and 3D Max. Like, it was not close. But in the rounds that they did win, in the sort of half games that we saw from them on Inferno, their decision-making was correct a lot of the time in the mid-round, especially on T-side. And I remember in both of these best of ones, specifically the Eternal Fire one, where they won the knife round, they chose to start T-side Inferno. And it was like, okay, they've got a game plan for this. Inferno, in my opinion, is a little bit T-sided anyway at the moment, but they've deliberately picked that against Eternal Fire, and they've gone, okay, let's run with it. And they had some really good rounds. They to set up and get themselves in a position where they could have made a lot more out of it, despite it being a 13-6 scoreline. But they had that hesitation. They had those, I think it's a combination of nerves on LAN. It's also a lot of respect being given over to Eternal Fire. And the one thing you don't want to do is kind of give respect over to Eternal Fire, because they will just take all the map control off you and they will force you into doing things you don't want to do. And that was the same story with 3D Max as well. 3D Max just ended up running at them and was just killing them over and over and over again. The banana control was just ridiculous from 3D Max. I don't want to talk about 3D Max, but what I do want to say about DMS is they had the right ideas. You could see them setting up to do things, but it was the hesitation, and they didn't go when they should have. And it was that extra 5 seconds, even 3 seconds, where if they had went before, it completely changes the round. But because they didn't, suddenly Eternal Fire have got all the information. So there's really good signs. AW played well. Height played well throughout all of their games, which gives you confidence, because that's kind of how I set this team up in the first place, where it's Height and AW sort of running the show. Can they carry it over towards LAN? Well, despite the circumstances, yes, it was still them that was performing. And did they have great games? No. But they were still present. They were still there. So for me, when I take a look at the DMS as a whole, I did see some signs where I was like, okay, I can kind of see what you're doing here. It's clear that you came into this with a good game plan. However, it's the hesitation, it's the nerves, it's everything else going on that has kind of put you a little bit out of whack.
How often, I mean, so when I was looking at their recent matchups, more than anything over on HLTV, AW hasn't really played, I would say, sort of the tier 1.5 teams. And Eternal Fire, actually, I would argue, is now tier 1. But I think the biggest was maybe like a Fnatic face-off. So we haven't really had an opportunity to see them against big opposition, right?
No, we haven't really. We saw them against Monte. We've seen them against we've seen them against Fnatic, and they beat Fnatic in a best of three. They took them down in a 2-1. They've beaten Ents again, a best of one, and again Ents another team that was at that event. And I think what's interesting is and this is kind of why it's exciting we can do this show, because these guys have just started out their journey, and in terms of sending you the pro, because obviously that's the show. It's not. I don't want you to invest all your money in these guys. I don't want you to. These are not. These could be the next big thing, but all I want you to do is keep your eye out on them. If you've got a bit of a rainy day fund and you feel like you can invest a few pennies here or there into them, then maybe it will mature into something great. But where I've seen them just kind of popping up everywhere, I've been very interested in just sort of watching their progression. And you can tell that they have got good structure. They've got a good framework for like their fundamentals just on every map. It's just kind of about refining it, and that will take time. If they can stop playing every official ever, then that will help as well, because they can do offline, they can do demo review. So I'm excited for sort of like the long-term future of this team. It's not kind of a instant invest, profit, sell. It's a deep thinker, and a deep sort of like give it like 2 years, which is a long time, especially in the community of CS where everyone wants results now. This one's more of a slow burner.
Slow burner. AW though, what impressed you about him? You said that he definitely delivered at skyesports. Maybe they weren't winning, but he showed up. What impressed you about him at that LAN?
Just in particular the fact that he was giving output. I think for a LAN when you've got a team that has exclusively only played online, you're never going to know what to expect out of them. And then the pressure that also comes with the community, because they've had good results online. If they get kind of banged out by an Eternal Fire, for example, by a 3D Max, people are going to just laugh at you and then go, haha, you've been really good online and now you're bad on LAN. And then everyone will throw every accusation under the sun. The reality is, guys, is that DMS are a team that should be losing to Eternal Fire, and they should be losing to 3D Max. They played Amcal and they did lose as well, but it was 13-7. It was a lot more competitive. They won the game against Revenant, which is the new MBK team. And unfortunately, Launex had to withdraw, so they were playing with their coach. But even so, they did win that game. So it's not like they kind of went to LAN and got blown out and they lost every single one, which is good for them. AW in particular, he was finding multi-kills. I feel like he was creating good space when he was getting the frags, finding the way into the site. I only watched him on Inferno. So Inferno, it was more a case of AW would go in second, they'd get both the B kills, they'd take the site. And then structurally, you start to look at DMS and you go, okay, well, this mistake was being made, that mistake was being made. But that's more of a collective issue rather than an AW issue. And yeah, the biggest thing for this team is you've got to kind of group AW in with the rest of DMS, because they're all learning together. And they all have got, I think they've got a pretty decent floor of skill. But AW and Height definitely have the biggest ceilings, just based on what I've seen. So that's why I'm kind of highlighting him specifically. I do think that he can get better. I think the whole team can get better. But I was impressed the most with sort of his multi-kill potential and his space generation after he was getting the kills. So he wasn't just kind of sitting still. Compared to the rest of his team, they've been a lot more active.
So we've spoken a little bit about how you feel that he can move roles a little bit, which is obviously something that you're always looking for in a new player, someone that is adaptable. And you've obviously mentioned the floor is pretty good. The ceiling needs to be raised a little bit. You said you were happy with the hype, but how does AW, in your opinion, improve his game? Is it more time with DMS and maybe a little bit of VOD review, or does he need to look at moving to another team? I mean, where do you think that growth to ensure that investment matures over 2 years has to come from?
I don't think it's a case of him moving teams right now, because they have had good results. I think it's a case of DMS as a collective going away and reviewing mistakes, going away maybe taking a week off tournament, but these guys are machines, so I don't think that's going to happen. I think for AW to improve, the whole collective of DMS needs to improve. because they need to, as a unit, figure out how to set up and support one another. And you need to do it together, because what you can't really have is this AW guy going, okay, I'm going to take the game into my own hands, and he just runs off and he kind of like breaks the structure of what they're trying to achieve, because they are a very structured team. They do like to sort of take these aggressive fights, but it's always supported with you two. It always is done on terms in which they are ready to go. Dust 2, for example, I think their defaults are a really interesting one, and this kind of gives context rather than me just saying words. But basically, when they do their default on D2, they take tunnels control. Before the fight short even happens, they have a flashbang that pops in towards mid doors, then suddenly the lower tunnels guy will swing at the same time as the short player, and then the lower tunnels player then flashes the short guy. Like, it's very bread and butter, but it is very much like, we do this and then you'll do this, rather than we've got the space, AW says, I've got a time in, I'm just going to go kill them. Like, it's very methodical. It doesn't look methodical when you watch it, but taking a step back and kind of analyzing all of the movements, you can see that they're kind of in sync with each other on different extremities. So for AW to improve, the whole team needs to improve. And I don't think it's beneficial for him to move away right now, because they're all learning that together. And they've also been, the core of this team has been together for about 1.5 years, which is a very long time. But it also shows that they're invested in each other's futures. And they've also seen really good results at an exponential growth. So I imagine that they'll kind of stay at this level for a little bit. And then once they figure out sort of how to get better and how to sort of anti-strat their opponents a bit more, have confidence in themselves as well, because that was the big thing that was lacking at the Sky Sports Championships. I understand them kind of maybe giving a bit of respect to 3D Max and Eternal Fire, but online, I think they would have played a bit differently. I think they would have just sort of trusted themselves, because it's a familiar feeling of kind of playing in your bedroom. So I think, as a little like cringe as this is going to be, it's like they need to believe in themselves a bit more, but they need to trust what they're doing, because it does work. What they've been doing does work. So they need to kind of just bring that mentality forward into every game they're playing, rather than thinking, oh no, it's a better team, we might lose.
I think LAN is such a, and this is for anyone watching, I do think sometimes we treat these players like robots, because if I think back to, and this is not even an example, like I don't play professionally, but if I come from this tiny region, we never had any opportunities. Our esports LANs were held together with sticks and string. It was very like in a basement. You were winning a mouse pad. When we started doing like esports broadcasts, they were so backwards. I think I would be the host, but I was also there was no support around me. You didn't get paid. You bought your own food. I've done this joke a million times and said it so many times about how my favorite experience was working a South African esports event where they did promise us, they didn't pay us, but they promised us food. And food was this massive bucket of KFC chicken, which was arrived as we went on to do a desk segment. And when we came off, the bucket was empty. And we said to the two people that were running behind the scenes, we're like, what happened? They were like, yeah, we were just really hungry. So you're going to have to order your own food. Like they literally, the people that were meant to give us food ate the food. God. The reason I'm giving you all of this is because I then got my first job, which was Gamescom. Ironically, ESL was doing a really cool, they were doing like a fan challenge with the then G2. It was actually Body and Apex, and they would choose this team from the audience and play against each other. And that was my first ever overseas Counter-Strike, anything esports event. And I arrive at this LAN. Now keep in mind, this is with ESL at Gamescom, so it's actually organized, and there's like, this is a tournament organizer that has their shit together. And I was terrified because I had absolutely no idea how anything worked at LAN. I didn't even know that there was a professional makeup artist that I had to go to, so I'd done my own makeup. I was too scared to speak to anyone. I didn't know where I was supposed to go. I'd never had an in-ear in my ear, and I was going, and everyone's talking to you like you know all of this stuff, because there's an expectation, right, that you're a professional. Yeah. But inside, you are having like a complete nervous breakdown. You're too afraid to ask anyone because you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing, and it's terrifying. That's just to work the event. Now, I can't imagine if you arrive as a player and you've never been to LAN, all you've got is what you've seen online, the conversations of like what a prac room looks like and stuff. And to be fair, even if you're a fan, what you see online is mainly tier 1 events. You don't see what this stuff looks like at other events. not only is this your first LAN, so you're feeling all of that and you're uncomfortable and you don't, and English is not your first language. So communication isn't exactly, coming easy. Plus you're going to India, which is pretty much like any of you coming to South Africa. That's kind of like, it feels very far away. Put all of this on a bunch of young players. It almost seems a little bit disingenuous for us to then put them on a stage and go, okay, now perform. And not only that, the stage that you're putting you on for the first few days, from what we know from social media, is that it was absolute chaos and a bit of a mess. And you don't know if this is normal, if this is what it's supposed to be. So not really fair, I would say, to judge AW or DMS on what we saw at Sky Esports. I think that they did what they could. And like you said, despite all of this, AW still showed those signs that we like. We've got to give them a little bit more time. And like you said, as cringe as it is, let them grow into themselves. Maybe in 2-3 LANs, we see a very different DMS.
Yeah, no, I'd say so, and I think that's why I was kind of giving the examples of this is how they like to set up their game, because people can quite easily go look at the results and they go, oh, yeah, they got destroyed, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, they did. Like they did lose pretty dominantly. They lost like 13-6, 13-5. And now I'm sat here trying to kind of sell a pro to you from that team. But all of the like extenuating circumstances really do play into it. I think also whilst we were having this sort of discussion, I've been thinking a bit more, and I don't know what the DMS sort of outlook is, but you don't know, for example, if they are they call themselves DMS, but are they actually an org? Like, are they actually being salaried, or are they playing all these tournaments consistently for the prize money because that's kind of their income? Like, I'm not sure, but that would make the most sense for why they are playing so many as well. So it is kind of a case of, you do need to find that balance, but at the same time, they feel like they can try and get some money in by getting placed quite highly in all these tournaments. Official reps is probably the best form of practice to some extent.
There you go. I went on quite a rant there supporting these young players. I'm not normally that nice. I don't know what's going on with me. Must be the Denmark air. We are here, though, like you mentioned, to sell the pro. You've given us a lot of insights into AW. You've given us some food for thought. You've explained that this is kind of your sleeper investment that you hope pays off on the long term. But it's time for the big question. BDog, I need you to sell me this pro.
I'll keep it short and sweet, and it's basically, again, with all these pros, they're young. He's just had his first LAN experience now, which means that in the future, they will know somewhat what to expect. But you imagine that the conditions will be a little bit better, but also they'll be a little bit more of a better team to sort of improve when that opportunity does come around. For DMS, they have been playing a lot of Counter-Strike. They have been growing, and they have been improving gradually as the years gone on. So that's a similar sentiment you can take with AW, because I didn't even know who the guy was in January. And now whenever I think of DMS, I think of height and I think of AW. Has got the potential to be a very explosive player, has got the potential to sort of capture a lot of rounds where it's sort of his mechanical ability and it's his understanding of the game that will generate a lot of space for DMS or whichever team he is playing in. This is not a instantaneous, you invest now and he's going to move to a tier 1 team. This guy will sit in tier 2, tier 3 for maybe 2-3 years, continue to hone his craft, and then potentially get an opportunity. Or it will be the team he's on himself, breaking out and forcing those opportunities. But you will know where he came from, because he's came from DMS and he's come from Sell Me This Pro.
I love this. I love that we've kind of gotten the roots of this isn't going to be, and I think that this is important because not everyone is going to be Donk. Not everyone's going to be m0NESY, right? You're not going to have these like superstars week after week. We're kind of going, hey, here's some pieces that could fit long term. And I love that you're giving us an opportunity to see those pieces. And obviously we'll check in 2 years if the show's still running, if you were right. That's the best part.
Sure.
How's your tooth doing?
Oh yeah, it's not good. It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. I was just saying we could do like a reunion episode in 2 years now, because we set that benchmark. We'll come back. Everyone will be like, "Yeah, I forgot this show existed." Just kidding, guys. We're gonna be doing it all the time.
Yeah.
We're gonna go. There's so many players.
I
Eventually,
love how you're
everyone
like
is gonna be a pro in tier 1.
there we go. I love how you're like reunion show, and I'm sitting here being like, wow, he's already ended the show in his mind, and we're only 3 episodes in. We're gonna keep going. I think we'll be here for no. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. We might not even be in Counter-Strike. I might decide I want a child, and then I'll have to retire.
I more meant if we were. It depends what our upload schedule is, because if, for example, I'm not saying that it will be, guys, but imagine if we do it this weekly, then that's 50. That's like 104 Sell Me These Pros.
It's not enough pros.
There's a lot of talent, but I don't know if I'm comfortable saying there's 100 pros that could be in tier 1 or should be in tier 1. You know, so I'm interested in sort of seeing how long we get. I've got at least 20 people in a file, so hopefully that's a good indicator of what we've got prepped so far, and I can definitely find more.
20. So this was actually something BDog and I have been discussing for a while, and we're trying to figure it out, is what our upload schedule should look like, because we were originally going to do an episode every second week. Now, because we just have episodes, we're putting them up weekly. But we'll put it to you, I think, to end this if you're watching. Do you want weekly episodes? Are you okay if sometimes we skip a week because B-Dog's got to now go to the dentist and have a wisdom tooth removed, or I just want to sleep some more in my hotel bed? Like, you let us know if you're happy for us to just kind of free roll this and do whatever we want, or if there is a very desperate need for a weekly episode. You can let us know in the comments. B-Dog, it's early. I'm going to go back to bed. I do believe you have to go work because you cast more games than DMS has been playing. So we're going to head on out, and
I think so.
I'll see you next time.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for the response on the videos as well, guys, because it really meant a lot to me, because I wasn't too sure how it was going to go down, and you guys have been brilliant, so thank you very much.
You told DMS to believe in themselves. You need to believe in yourself too, B-Dog.